I still remember the night everything changed. The night love was sold, and silence became my only language. It was raining outside, not the kind of rain that cools the earth, but the kind that feels heavy, as if the sky itself was crying. I sat on the broken wooden bench outside our small house, waiting for a message that never came. Her name was Ava, and she had promised to write. But instead of a letter, I received whispers. Whispers that my fiancée, the only woman I'd ever truly loved, had been married off to a man more than twice her age. His name was Alexander. Her father, Mr. Liam, made the arrangement. They said it was for business, for reputation, for stability. But I knew what it really was, a sale. Ava was 18, innocent, and still learning how to dream. And I was just William, a man with calloused hands and an honest heart. I couldn't offer mansions or diamonds, only love. And sometimes, love isn't enough when money speaks louder. The morning after I heard the news, I went to her father's estate. The gate stood taller than any tree I'd ever seen, guarded by men who looked like they had no hearts left to feel. They didn't let me in, of course. I waited outside for hours, holding the small ring I'd saved for 2 years to buy a simple silver band with her initials carved inside. When the sun began to set, I realized she wouldn't come. And that's when it hit me. Some people aren't taken from you, they're traded away. But life has a strange way of twisting paths together again. Years later, when I thought I'd buried the pain, fate made me cross her road once more. And the woman I found wasn't the fragile Ava I once knew. She was different now, softer, wiser, and carrying eyes that held too many untold stories. That night when she said, "William, do you believe love can survive even after it's been broken?" I didn't know what to answer, because deep down, I still loved her, and maybe, just maybe, she still loved me too. But love, when tested by time and pain, becomes something else, quieter, purer. This isn't just a story about betrayal or regret. It's about how love can survive even when it's forced to change shape, about how the heart learns to forgive what the world refuses to forget. And this is our story. Before everything turned into silence and separation, there was light, a kind of light that didn't come from chandeliers or city skylines, but from small moments that made life feel big. Back then, I was just William, the son of a local carpenter. I spent most of my days sanding wood, helping my father build furniture for the people in our small town. We didn't have much, but what we had was ours. Honest, earned, and simple. Ava came into my life one early summer morning when she stopped by our shop to pick up a custom chair her father had ordered. She stood out even before she spoke. Her dress was soft blue, the kind that swayed with every step. She smiled politely, but her eyes looked curious, like someone who'd stumbled into a world too small for her shoes. "Are you the one who made this?" she asked, running her fingers along the polished armrest. "Yes," I said, feeling my throat tighten a little. "It's simple, but it'll last." She smiled again, this time softer. Sometimes simple things do last longer. That's how it began, with a line so ordinary, yet it stayed with me. Ava kept visiting, sometimes to pick up furniture, sometimes with excuses so transparent they made us both laugh. She'd bring me tea from her driver, sit on the unfinished benches, and ask about the smell of wood, the patience it took to build something by hand. She once told me, "You're lucky, William. You make things that people use. My father only makes things that people fear." That line stayed with me longer than any kiss or promise. It told me everything about her world, a world of marble floors, luxury cars, and boardroom battles. She didn't belong there, not in spirit, and yet that was her cage. When she turned 17, we started talking about the future, quietly, in places no one could hear. She wanted to study art, to travel without guards or plans. I wanted to marry her, to build her a home where she could breathe. But dreams like ours don't survive long in places like hers. Because her father, Mr. Liam, didn't see love as something pure, he saw it as a contract, a trade. He was a man of power, the kind who never raised his voice, yet made everyone tremble. When he found out about us, he didn't shout or threaten. He simply smiled, and that smile was colder than winter. One evening, he came to our small shop himself. My father had never seen such a car before. It gleamed under the streetlight like something out of another world. "William," he said, walking in with a calmness that cut through the air, "you're the boy who's been spending time with my daughter." I tried to speak, but my voice betrayed me. "Yes, sir." He looked around, hands behind his back, studying the furniture, not me. Then he said, "You're a talented young man, hard-working, but you and I live in very different worlds. My daughter doesn't belong in this sawdust life." He paused, letting the silence hum between us. "She needs a future, not struggle. You may love her, but love doesn't pay for hospitals, houses, or happiness. Money does." It was the kind of truth that hurts even when you know it's wrong. I looked at him and said, "Maybe not, sir, but love builds the people who build those houses." He didn't respond. He just gave a small smile, the kind that ends conversations without a word. And when he left, I knew something had begun to end. Ava cried when she found out he'd visited me. She kept saying, "He doesn't understand us, William. He doesn't see you like I do." But deep down, I think she knew. Her father always got what he wanted. And that summer, what he wanted was a business alliance with a man named Alexander, a 40-year-old investor whose wealth could secure their empire for another generation. When Ava turned 18, the marriage was arranged. She didn't even know until the papers were ready. She came to me one last time, under the old willow tree near the edge of town, the place where we'd once promised forever. Her hands were trembling when she said, "He's making me do it, William. I don't have a choice." I wanted to fight for her. I wanted to go to her father, to scream, to beg. But she stopped me. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "If you fight, he'll destroy you. Please, don't make me lose you in another way." I held her then, for the last time, or so I thought. The smell of her hair, the way her tears touched my shirt, I still remember it all. She left that night, and a week later, she was married to Alexander. The newspapers called it a powerful union. But for me, it was a funeral, not of life, but of love. Ava's wedding took place in the grand ballroom of the St. Clair Hotel, a place I had only seen in passing. From behind the iron gates that guarded its perfection, I didn't go, of course. I couldn't, but I heard the music faintly carried by the wind as I stood outside on the road that led nowhere for me. People said it was beautiful, a fairy tale wedding, they called it. But fairy tales are written for children. The truth was quieter, colder, and far more human. She married Alexander, a man of 40 who owned half the hotels in the city. I didn't hate him. I didn't even know him, but his name became a scar in my heart long before I saw his face. For months after the wedding, I tried to bury myself in work. Sawdust filled my lungs, but nothing filled the hollow space she left behind. My father would glance at me sometimes, worried, but never speaking. Silence had become our shared language. It was a few months later when I saw her again. By accident, or maybe by fate. I had gone to the city to deliver furniture for a client, a wealthy businessman, who happened to be one of Alexander's associates. As I was unloading the chairs near the entrance, a car door opened behind me. I turned, and there she was, Ava. She wore white, not like a bride, but like someone who'd been living in a world that demanded purity she no longer felt. Our eyes met just for a second, but that second stretched longer than years. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Everything her lips didn't say was already in her eyes: pain, guilt, and something softer, maybe longing. "William," she said, her voice trembling like a note held too long. I froze, unable to speak. My heart beat so loud it drowned the noise of the city. How have you been?" she asked. "I'm fine," I lied. "Working, same as always." She nodded slowly, as if she didn't believe me, but respected the lie. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered. "Maybe we weren't supposed to," I said, though I didn't mean it. Then, a man's voice called from behind her. "Darling, we're late." It was Alexander. He was taller than I expected, his presence quiet yet commanding. But there was no arrogance in his tone. He looked at me, then at the wooden chair I was holding, and said gently, "You made this." "Yes, sir." He smiled faintly. "It's solid work. I like craftsmanship like that." Then, with surprising warmth, he added, "Thank you, son." And just like that, they walked away. Ava turned once more, her eyes glistening, before stepping into the car. That moment stayed with me, because in that brief meeting, I saw something strange. Alexander didn't seem cruel. There was no coldness in his voice, no ownership in his touch, just calm, quiet care. Weeks passed, and whispers began to spread. People said Ava's new husband wasn't what her father expected. He wasn't ruthless enough for business. He didn't attend social galas or make grand deals. Instead, he spent his evenings in the garden, reading or playing the piano for his young wife. They said he treated her gently, almost too gently, as if he knew she'd been broken before she came to him. It was hard to hear. Hard, because I wanted to hate him. But every rumor I heard painted him not as a villain, but as a man trying to heal someone else's wounds. And that made it worse, because kindness is harder to compete with than cruelty. Then one winter evening, a letter came. There was no name on the front, just a delicate handwriting I could never mistake. William, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for what I've become, but I need you to know something. Alexander is not what I expected. He doesn't touch me without asking. He listens. He tells me that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. I don't love him the way I loved you. Maybe I never will. But he's teaching me that love can also mean peace. Sometimes I wonder if you hate me. Please don't, Ava. I read that letter until the paper began to soften in my hands. I didn't know what to feel. Jealousy, comfort, or grief. Maybe all three. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing her words. He tells me that love doesn't have to hurt. Was I the hurt she meant? Or the love? Months passed into years. Our lives moved forward in quiet circles. I kept working, saving, building a name for myself in the city. Ava stayed hidden in her marble world. I heard she'd started painting again, filling rooms with colors that once belonged only to her dreams. But one afternoon, something happened that brought our worlds crashing together again. My company was hired to restore an old countryside house, a property newly purchased by none other than Mr. Alexander Weston. When I arrived to inspect the site, I saw her standing near the porch, her hair tied loosely, sunlight caught in it like gold. She looked free, almost happy. But when she saw me, she froze and then smiled, shyly. "William," she whispered, "you're really here." "Yes," I said softly. "Looks like life doesn't like letting us forget." Alexander came out soon after. He greeted me warmly, shook my hand, and told me how much he admired my work. "You're the same young man from the hotel, aren't you?" he said. I nodded. "Good to have you here," he said, patting my shoulder. "This house? It's for Ava. She's always wanted a place that feels like home." That line broke something in me, not because it hurt, but because it healed. He wasn't building a palace for her. He was building a home, something I had once dreamed of doing. For the next few weeks, I worked there almost every day. I watched them quietly from a distance. Alexander would walk with her through the garden, listening to her ideas for the design. Sometimes they'd argue softly, laugh, then go quiet again. They weren't a picture-perfect couple, but there was gentleness between them, a kind of safety I hadn't seen in her eyes before. One evening, while I was packing up, Alexander came to me. He looked tired, yet peaceful. "You know," he said quietly, "when Ava first came into my life, I knew she didn't love me. I didn't expect her to. I just wanted to give her a life where she could breathe again." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Then he looked at me, not as a rival, but as a man who understood. "You were part of her before I was," he said. "I can see it in her eyes. Maybe you still are, and that's okay. Love isn't ownership. Sometimes it's just the act of setting someone free." I didn't know what to say. That night, I sat in my truck for a long time before driving home. The sunset spilled across the sky, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. I felt something gentler, like gratitude, because sometimes the love we lose finds a home elsewhere. Not to replace what we had, but to remind us that love itself was real. It was late autumn when the truth began to unravel, the kind of season when the world feels between endings and beginnings. The leaves were fading, the air tasted of rain, and I'd just finished restoring the last room in Alexander's countryside home. That evening, as I packed my tools, Ava came to the workshop behind the house. She looked nervous, holding a folded letter in her hand. "William," she said softly, "do you have a moment?" Her voice still carried the same gentleness it had when we were younger, but now there was something deeper beneath it, a quiet strength born from everything she'd survived. She handed me the letter. "It's from my father," she whispered. "It arrived this morning." I frowned. "Mr. Liam." She nodded. "He's sick. He wants to see me. But there's more. He said he has something to confess before he dies." The words hung between us, heavy and sharp. "I don't know if I should go," she continued, tears gathering in her eyes. He's the reason I lost everything. You, my peace. Why would I want to hear anything from him now? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, realizing how much she'd changed, no longer the fragile girl who used to hide behind fear. She was a woman now, wounded but whole in her own way. Maybe, I said slowly. Sometimes the things we don't want to hear are the ones that free us. Ava looked away, silent for a moment. Then she nodded. Will you come with me? I hesitated. Ava, please, she whispered. I don't want to face him alone. So I went. Mr. Liam's mansion hadn't changed. The same tall iron gates, the same perfect symmetry, the same air of power. But the man who sat inside wasn't the same. He was older, smaller somehow, his skin pale, his hands trembling as he tried to pour tea. When Ava entered, his eyes softened, the way a storm softens before it dies. Ava, he said weakly, you came. She didn't answer at first. She just stood there, her arms crossed, holding her pain-like armor. I didn't come for forgiveness, she said quietly. You wanted to talk? Say what you need to say. Mr. Liam's eyes flicked to me for a moment, then back to her. You brought him, he said. The boy who loved you. I brought someone who once knew what kindness meant, Ava replied coldly. He smiled faintly. You have her strength, William. I used to hate that about you. I stayed silent. Then he coughed a deep, rattling sound and began to speak again. You think I sold you to Alexander for money, Ava, but that's not the full truth. I didn't sell you. I saved you. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Saved me, she repeated. You destroyed me. He shook his head slowly. You don't know what I was saving you from. Then, with a trembling hand, he reached for a drawer and pulled out a small, weathered envelope. Inside were documents, business contracts, letters, and a photo of a man I didn't recognize. That man, Liam said, pointing to the photo, was one of my investors and my enemy. He threatened to ruin everything I built. But he didn't just want my company, he wanted you. He was powerful enough to take you, and the law wouldn't have stopped him. Ava looked horrified. You're saying you married me off to protect me? He nodded weakly. I chose Alexander because he was honorable, because he would keep you safe. I knew you'd hate me for it, but I couldn't let you fall into that man's hands. A silence filled the room, thick as the air before a storm. Ava took a step back, her expression torn between anger and disbelief. You could have told me. You could have trusted me. Liam's voice cracked. Would you have believed me, Ava? At 18, you only believed in love. You believed in him. He glanced at me. But love doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it blinds you. I felt my chest tighten. For years, I'd carried hatred for this man. Hatred for taking her away, for stealing my future. But in that moment, seeing him frail and broken, I saw something else. A father who'd made terrible choices for reasons that weren't all evil. Ava began to cry silently. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that breaks hearts. Liam reached out a trembling hand. Ava, I don't ask for forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth before I go. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she took his hand. Goodbye, father, she whispered, and tears slipped down her cheeks. He smiled faintly. You always deserved love, my daughter. I'm just sorry I didn't let you have it in your own way. By the time we left the room, he was asleep, or maybe just gone. The house felt colder than before, yet lighter somehow. Outside, the air smelled of rain again. Ava stood beside me, silent. Do you believe him? I asked. She nodded slowly. I do, but it doesn't make the pain go away. Pain doesn't disappear, I said softly. It just changes shape. She looked up at me then, eyes glistening in the fading light. I never stopped thinking about you, William. Not even for a day. I know, I whispered. I never stopped either. But then she looked down, her voice trembling. I love Alexander too, in a different way. He showed me kindness when I couldn't even look at myself. He never asked me to forget you. He just gave me peace. I smiled sadly. Then he's a better man than most. At that moment, headlights appeared down the road. Alexander's car pulled up quietly beside us. He stepped out, his coat brushing against the wind, and walked toward us with that same calm presence I'd always noticed. I thought I'd find you here, he said softly. Ava turned to him, eyes red. He's gone. Alexander nodded, his face full of compassion. Then let's go home. But before she could move, he looked at me, and for a long, quiet moment, We simply understood. He reached into his pocket and handed me an old photograph. It was of a wooden bench, the one I used to sit on outside my father's shop. "I found this in her sketchbook," he said gently. "She drew it every year. Thought you should have it." I took the photo, my throat tightening. "Thank you." He gave a faint smile. "Take care of yourself, William." Then he turned, placed his hand around Ava's shoulder, and together they walked toward the car. As they drove away, I stood under the dim streetlight, holding that small photograph. The world was quiet again, the kind of quiet that hurts and heals at the same time. I finally understood something that had taken me years to learn. Love doesn't always mean possession. Sometimes it's just the courage to let someone be happy, even if it's not with you. And in that silence, I whispered to myself, maybe this is what real love looks like after all. It's strange how life moves on, even when the heart refuses to. Days after Ava's father passed away, I found myself working again, not out of desire, but out of habit. The steady rhythm of wood against sandpaper, the smell of sawdust, the hum of my father's old radio, they kept me steady. They reminded me that no matter how large the world's storms grew, some small things always remained. Ava and Alexander moved quietly after that. They didn't hold grand memorials or invite cameras. They simply disappeared from the public eye, settling into the countryside home I had helped build. The same one that once carried the scent of new paint and unfinished dreams. For a while, I didn't see them, but I heard things, soft rumors from workers, deliveries, whispers. They said Ava spent most of her time painting now, that her art had changed, her colors calmer, her lines slower, almost meditative. And Alexander? He had retired from business altogether, spending his evenings walking with her or playing the piano she loved to listen to. At first, I told myself I didn't need to know these things. But I did, because some part of me needed to know she was safe, that all the pain, the years of separation, had led her to a kind of peace. One evening, nearly a year after her father's death, a letter arrived. The handwriting was familiar, flowing, elegant, but gentler than before. "William, if this letter ever finds you, please know that I think of you often, not with regret, but with gratitude. You were my beginning, and Alexander, he became my continuation. Life is kinder now, in ways I never expected, but there's a part of me that still feels connected to that small shop, that wooden bench, and to the boy who once believed love could fix everything. You were right, you know. Love does build people. Thank you for building me." Ava, I read it slowly, again and again, until the ink blurred through my tears. I didn't feel jealousy anymore. Only a quiet ache, the kind that doesn't hurt, just reminds you of where you've been. That night, I walked to the edge of town, to the old willow tree where we'd said goodbye all those years ago. The branches were older, heavier now, like time itself had bowed down in silence. I sat beneath it and closed my eyes, listening to the wind move through the leaves. For the first time, I didn't picture her face when I thought of her. I pictured her peace, her laughter somewhere far away, her hands stained with paint, her eyes resting easy, and that was enough. A few months later, I received an invitation, a simple cream-colored envelope with no return address. Inside was a note from Alexander. "William, Ava told me you were the one who taught her what love means. She says your kindness shaped her more than any lesson in life. She wants to see you just once more. If you're willing, come to the house you built next Sunday evening. No pressure." I hesitated for days. I told myself it wasn't necessary, that we'd said everything there was to say. But on Sunday, I went. The countryside looked different now, gentler, alive. Flowers bloomed along the paths, the garden hummed with quiet life, and the house stood proud, no longer just a structure of wood and stone. It was a home, a place filled with years of healing. Ava met me at the door. Her hair had traces of silver, but her smile was the same, soft, luminous. "William," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "you came." "I wasn't sure I should," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm glad you did." Inside, Alexander was sitting by the piano, playing a quiet tune. He stood when he saw me and extended his hand. "Good to see you again," he said warmly. "Ava's been waiting for this day for a long time." We sat together in the garden as the sun began to set. For a long time, no one spoke. The silence was comfortable, like old friends who didn't need words anymore. Finally, Ava turned to me. Do you ever wonder how different life could have been if things had gone our way? I smiled sadly. I used to, but now I think it went the only way it could. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I think so too. Then Alexander spoke softly. You know, I used to be jealous of you, William. She spoke of you often, not out of longing, but out of respect. You were her anchor before she learned how to swim. I looked at him, humbled. And you were her ocean. You gave her peace. He smiled. Then maybe between us, she finally found balance. Ava reached for both our hands, hers delicate, trembling. You both gave me love, in different shapes. One taught me how to dream, the other taught me how to rest. I'll spend the rest of my life grateful for both. The three of us sat there until the sky turned violet and the first stars appeared. There was no bitterness, no guilt, just peace, the kind that only comes when hearts finally stop fighting the past. When I left that night, Ava hugged me one last time. Goodbye, William, she whispered, not because we're ending, but because we've already healed. Goodbye, Ava, I said quietly, and thank you for teaching me that love doesn't have to stay to be real. Alexander walked me to my car. As I opened the door, he said, She's painting again. You'll see her work soon. She's finally painting the life she wanted. I nodded. Take care of her. I always will, he said. And he did. Years have passed since that evening. I still work with wood, still live in the same small town, but my shop has grown. My life, too. People come to me now not just for furniture, but for advice, for stories, for warmth. They say, my hands build things with soul. Maybe they do. Maybe because they were shaped by loss and by love that refused to turn bitter. Sometimes, when I walk by the riverside, I imagine Ava and Alexander somewhere under another sunset, laughing softly, living quietly, and I smile, because love like ours doesn't disappear. It just changes homes. Time has a way of softening everything, even memories that once cut deep. Years have passed since that evening in Alexander's garden, and sometimes I wonder if it really happened at all. But then, a breeze will carry the faint scent of jasmine, or a melody from a distant piano, and I'll remember, not with pain, but with peace. Ava's paintings became known across cities. People said there was something sacred in her art, something honest, almost spiritual. Each canvas told a story of love that survived its breaking of hearts that healed not by forgetting, but by forgiving. And though she never signed her full name, I always knew which ones were hers. I could feel her silence in them, the same silence we once shared under the willow tree. Alexander passed away quietly one winter. They said he went in his sleep, holding one of Ava's paintings in his hands, the one of a sunrise breaking through fog. A few months later, Ava sent me another letter. It was short this time, written in trembling ink. He's gone, William, but he left me with peace. And now, I want to leave you with something too. Attached to the letter was a small package, a wooden box, smooth and carved with delicate patterns. When I opened it, I found a simple key inside and another note, the studio by the lake. It's yours now. Maybe it's time you start building again, not for others, but for yourself. I went there a week later. It was small, just one room with wide windows overlooking the calm water. The air smelled of paint and pine, and the light fell soft and golden across the floor. Her easel stood by the window, empty now, but I could almost hear her humming, feel her presence in the colors that lingered on the walls. I placed the letter on the table, sat down, and for the first time in many years, I began to draw, not furniture, not walls or beams, but people faces. Her face, and then I realized I wasn't trying to recreate her. I was trying to understand her. I worked until sunset, the lake glowing like molten gold outside. And when I finally looked up, I whispered, "Thank you, Ava, for coming back to me, even in silence. Now, I'm an old man. My hands shake, my hair is white, but my heart, it's still full. Sometimes young couples visit my workshop asking for advice. They tell me about their heartbreaks, their betrayals, their fears. And I tell them this, love doesn't always stay. Sometimes it teaches. Sometimes it leaves to make space for something else. Peace, purpose, or another kind of love. Don't curse it for leaving. Thank it for coming." Then I smile and point to the willow tree outside my shop, now taller and fuller than ever. "See that tree?" I say. "Once, someone I loved cried under it, and now it gives shade to everyone who passes by. That's what love does. It roots, it grows, it gives. They usually smile, not fully understanding, but one day they will. A few months ago, I visited the lake again. The studio still stood, a little older now, but alive. Birds nested near the window, the air smelled of spring, and as I sat there, a soft wind brushed against my cheek. For a second, I thought I heard her voice faint, warm, full of light. "You built me, William, and I built you back." I closed my eyes, smiled, and whispered, "Yes, Ava." The sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the water in colors only she could have imagined. And I knew then love had never left. It had only changed form, becoming everything around me.